the We Wreck Records podcast. Being imprinted by a culture like New York hardcore, I mean, it's lives in mythology for music forever.
The music is so charged, you know what I mean? A lot, and it's charged like with like a lot of the time it's like, righteousness, disgust, anger, hope, and there's a whole range of emotions, but it's usually like really strong ones.
I think it captured this aura, this it captured something about the time, about New York, because we were living amongst criminals. We had serial killers, we had murders living with us. We didn't know. We were just living.
And like Agnostic Front says, the old New York, when it was dangerous, that's when you had to look over your shoulder all the time. You had to keep your back against the wall. A lot of our lyrics came from those experiences.
In New York City, look, if Agnostic Front was from any other place, let's say Agnostic Front was from Los Angeles or somewhere else, we would never probably sound the way we sound. We're definitely a product of New York City.
The feeling of growing up in a rat cage with a bunch of other rats that want to eat and kill you.
That record, that edge, that sound, those lyrics was what bridged New York hardcore worldwide.
Roger from Agnostic Front pioneered New York hardcore with the band's seminal 1984 classic Victim in Pain. Billy from Biohazard was an integral part of the New York hardcore, hip-hop, heavy metal crossover that started in the 90s. And Walter Schreifels, who started out in New York hardcore bands like Gorilla Biscuits and Youth of Today, with his band Quicksand, started the post-hardcore revolution. So in this week's episode, these incredible artists reflect on this moment in time and the characters that made the music matter. There hasn't been many people like HR from the Bad Brains in the musical world. I think he's pretty much one of one. One of one. I think
that might be a good thing. I lived with him briefly. He's definitely out there.
Yeah.
But his contributions are incredible. The whole band. There was nothing like that. Most of their fame does come from New York, but they did it. They bought it and they changed everything. They revolutionized New York hardcore, and then we came in and did our thing, which sounds nothing like the Bad Brains, of course, but. Either way, they were a big influence to all those bands you mentioned.
I remember watching the CBGB's Bad Brains video, and I was just like, first of all, I was like, this shit is crazy. I was like, these motherfuckers black making this music. I didn't even know black people made this music.
Right.
Spaces where music scenes can flourish and multiply are absolutely crucial.
One of the shows back then was the A7 Club. The A7 Club closed down in the December of 1983. We actually played the last show ever at the A7 Club. Then everything shifted to CBGB's, and it was rightfully shifted because all of a sudden, once everything shifted to CBGB's in a more like weekly base, the scene kind of grew. And once Victim in Pain dropped, the scene just exploded because prior to that, it was okay, but somehow, some way, Victim in Pain really brought what we call the bridge and tunnel people over, and it just started creating all this kind of it got bigger, the scene somehow. But Victim in Pain was different. It was different. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was different till I saw it start to resonate heavily with people that were oppressed and different type of people that are actually living a certain lifestyle.
We were escaping the pain that we were carrying around. We masked it with substance abuse, drugs. Suddenly, unintentionally, subconsciously, we became more interested in making music together, and that replaced the need and desire to cover up all that pain inside.
It seems like the why mattered as much almost as the what.
The why to me would be, initially just wanting to play CBGBs and be a part of this thing that was going on. It was so fantastic to be a part of it when there was so many different kinds of bands, like doing this kind of music, which was 100% made by kids for kids, and it was like could be anything. We had this like incredibly magic venue like that's known around the world as our little playground and mixing sort of laboratory.
It's the subculture welcomes all of us with open arms, and suddenly we feel like, oh, I can be myself here.
Those are the most intimate, magical years, everything prior to that, because everybody was a part of something. The artists were a part of making flyers, making fanzines. We're making music. Somebody's doing poetry over here. Everybody was involved. And back then, a lot of bands had their own distinctive sound, which was amazing. Like, you knew Negative Approach was from Detroit. You knew SSD Control, Boston, Minor Threat from DC. But for some reason, Agnostic Front was always a people's band in New York City.
Yeah,
As
man.
soon as they formed, it was everybody wanted to see him. It was like the band, the people's band. And till date, almost we kind of almost are the same thing. We come to the cities, we come to places to play, and it's just a celebration of our movement. And that was something that was always special. Me looking from the outside in. Like I was like, wow, this band, everybody gravitates. And when it was that big show in Camden, New Jersey, when it was SSD Control, Minor Threat, Agnostic Front was a band that was invited. All the other bands were around. But for some reason, and it was never the best band, and I'll never tell you we're the best band either, period. But I mean, a lot of those bands you mentioned, I love. Urban Waste is one of my favorite bands. But for some reason, it was the people's band. New York City was edgy back then. Like I said, barely anything. Every storefront you see that's a high-end storefront with some kind of cupcakes or whatever garbage they got going on, or clothing. Those used to be rehearsal spaces of bands actually rehearsing
Yeah.
and artists painting. I mean, it was a very cool scene when it comes to that, very artist related, whether it was music or actually physical art and stuff like that.
This show is proudly presented by DistroKid, and we have a special deal for all the musicians out there looking to release their new music fast. DistroKid helps over 2 million musicians around the world release on all major music streaming platforms and YouTube. You keep 100% of your earnings, can access a huge range of features, and if you like this show, support this show by taking advantage of this incredible offer, 30% off your first year with DistroKid. Just head to distrokid.com/VIP/WeWreckRecords. This show is presented by Grillo's Pickles. Grillo's Pickles make the freshest, crunchiest, most delicious pickles. And even if you're not a pickle fan, you should try Grillo's today. Why not? Live a little. You can find them in the refrigerated section of your local grocery store, so chill out and eat a pickle. In the 90s, a new level of musical cross-pollination took hold, and Biohazard's Urban Discipline captured the splatter of sound.
It was a great era, and it was very influential for not just us, but for everyone. It was a time when boundaries were blown away, because before that, when we came up, and even before our first record, if you were into hardcore, you didn't go to metal shows. If you were into metal shows, you didn't go. And nobody went to hip hop shows except hip hop heads. We played with hardcore bands that we looked up to, like Agnostic Front or Cro-Mags. We were too metal, and we weren't hardcore enough. But then when we played with metal bands like Exodus or Slayer, we weren't metal enough. We were too hardcore, and we had too much groove and there was too much bounce. Or not too much bounce, but we didn't resonate with the majority of the crowd. And especially being heavily influenced by hip hop, there was a flow and a subject matter that were similar to the hip hop, what was going on at that time, which in my opinion was some of the greatest moments in hip hop. So we kind of created our own audience, a group of people who felt like they were outsiders that suddenly felt they were part of a scene of peers that like the same thing.
Walter Schreifels and his band Quicksand became one of the architects of the post-hardcore sound with their 1993 absolute perler slip. I think there's a lot of fascination in my generation, generations below me, about this time, about 1993 and what happened.
Like, we were just in like hardcore bands like a couple of years before, and like at a really good time. So we were kind of trying to experiment and make a new kind of music, based on some influences of bands that we thought were cool at the time, which, there was tons of cool bands, but like not that many that were like really popular and good, but, kind of taking that all in and then all of a sudden, like, this sort of sea change happened with, with Nirvana and all this kind of music that was like, like Sonic Youth had a gold record, like music that would have not even been considered at all was all of a sudden being brought out to the public. And I
Mm.
think like what we had, coming from New York City, coming from like this hardcore background, and that it was just like representing a certain kind of cultural sort of thing, or a sort of stream of influences and energy, like post-hardcore, like as most as you could be post-hardcore, like we were post-hardcore. Like Fugazi are another post-hardcore band.
Yeah.
Embrace is a post-hardcore band, so it's like coming from that. Laughing Hyenas are post-hardcore band. A lot of these bands, we were so that.
What do you
And
how do you define it? No, carry on. You finish your thought.
I mean, it's kind of as it says, it's like you were really into hardcore and now you're making some other kind of music, but you've got this hardcore baggage with you. So in that baggage is like a whole bunch of really cool tricks, but at the same time, you want to expand beyond the sort of beautiful simplicity of hardcore. You want to do something, maybe it's artistically more ambitious or emotionally sort of more complex, but you still have those hardcore tricks. So how do you use them, or how do you run away from them?
I think it's quite lovely having you explain post-hardcore, because I was always like, as a music journalist, I was like, post-hardcore, hardcore's still going. What are you talking about? But no, it's about your post-hardcore journey.
It's your journey.
It's not about. This is
It's not
like a
like
profound
hardcore's
moment
over.
for me. Like I've been getting it.
Yeah,
Like,
good.
what do you mean post-hardcore? Oh yeah, he used to do hardcore and now he doesn't do hardcore.
Well, it's also like post-punk, it's
Yeah.
like
It's not
where
over.
they're taking sort of, yeah, it's not, punk's not over, but it's like post-punk is the period like right after like this big punk explosion where some of these punk people were figuring out a different way to do music.
Well, what did it feel like to talk more about your inner world than the world around you? Was it hard? Is it weird to like get on stage and talk? Like, did it feel differently than as you say, like going, we're all in this together, rah, rah, rah.
Yeah.
Kind of different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was time it just felt like the natural progression for me. And it wasn't so much like, at the time, I wasn't really struggling with the idea of like it being too autobiographical.
Yeah.
It was more like, I think that these are feelings that people like me are feeling at this time in my life.
Generations of fans and bands continue to fall in love with New York hardcore and post-hardcore.
The Deftones were big fans, or like Rage were fans. You know what I mean? Like people that like, because of the timing, like that they picked up on what we were doing and obviously were doing their own thing and doing an amazing thing. But like those bands are so big that they influence so many other bands. So like part of our DNA is sort of like in that stream.
You mentioned new hardcore bands, and hardcore is bigger than it's ever been, I think, today. That is, because of bands like Turnstile and Knocked Loose and Scowl.
It's funny, all those bands you mentioned, I've gone to see. They're friends of mine. I just went with my daughter to see Knocked Loose. We went to go see them, hung out with them backstage. I mean, look, everybody's doing their own variation of whatever's going on. And I'm just like, dude, I'm trying sorry, I'm trying not to cry, believe it or not. I'm just so honored these people still love us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
Like what we did was so important to all these bands. Where they don't sound like us, they don't, but they acknowledge us and respect us because we were something that meant something to them. All those bands you just mentioned and more, And sometimes I'm like, excuse me, because I don't know.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Because even my wife has said to me, we've been in places and people come out of nowhere like, oh, she's like, you've changed so many people's lives. You've done stuff for people that had no hope and had no nothing. That was your purpose in life. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. Like, I mean, it's amazing.
And hardcore is undoubtedly the raw human antidote to the artificial world we live in.
I don't even know what's real anymore. I don't even want to go on, like that. And I tell her when we play live, I tell her there's a time when our song we do, and I tell everybody, and I make everybody come closer to me. We do this all the time. I make everybody come closer to me, and then I tell everybody to introduce yourselves to each other, because this is real. This is where I've made lifelong friends. And I always tell everybody, fuck the internet and fuck all that. That's bullshit. That's just, this is real. This is where you're going to make a lifelong friends. Shake your hand, introduce yourself. And then now that we're all friends, and I want you to look to the left, to the right, just slightly push that person, slightly push them. Next thing you know, everybody's pushing everybody. And that's how you start a mosh pit. Boom, we go into the song.